Today we'll be looking at a case from the end of the 19th century, so sit back as we go to the USA. Mary Tobin was born in Canada, the daughter of a successful businessman. However, when her father lost much of his money and property, the family moved to the USA, settling in the city of Franklin in Pennsylvania. It was there that Mary spent much of her teenage years, and where she received a good education. She was regarded as intelligent, capable, and of good character, and once she finished her studies, she began working as a teacher in the public schools of Franklin. Those who knew her during that period spoke well of her reputation, describing her as well-educated and dependable, qualities that led later to her employment in both nursing and clerical positions. By the mid-1880s, she was considered a respectable and accomplished woman, trusted by families and employers alike. In 1885, Mary took a job in New York to nurse and teach a child who was suffering from a disease of the throat and required the use of a tube. While there, she went with the child and the child's mother to West New Brighton on Staten Island and stayed in the home of her employer's cousin, a gentleman named Dr. Robinson. At the time, Dr. Robinson was away, but Miss Tobin left a very good impression on his mother, who told her son that the young lady had said before leaving that if the office assistant ever left, she would be glad to take the position, and Dr. Robinson's mother told her son that she thought that she would do very well in the role. In April 1887, the position became vacant, so Dr. Robinson began corresponding with friends in Franklin to find out whether Miss Tobin was suitable for the position. Those to whom he wrote replied that they believed that she would be a very good replacement, so he sent her a telegram, and she came to work in West New Brighton. Her duties included bookkeeping, sending out bills, and managing the business side of the practice. Dr. Robinson soon discovered, however, that Mary's knowledge of bookkeeping and office matters was far less than he had expected. Although this caused some concern, she was attentive and considerate towards his elderly father, who was still living, his mother having died the previous year. For that reason he retained her services, even though she proved of limited usefulness as an office assistant. Mary had always attended the Methodist Church in Franklin, and in West New Brighton she did the same. However, after a time, she decided to abandon religion altogether. This phase of open disbelief lasted through the latter months of 1887, and then in the early part of 1888, she returned to the church and announced that she wanted to become a nun. She then began reading in preparation for admission to the sisterhood. However, this did not happen, and in 1889, she announced that she was to be married. Strangely, beyond this declaration, she revealed very little and was very secretive about the engagement. When asked to whom she was engaged, she would always decline to say. In April of 1889, Miss Tobin resigned her position in the employment of Dr. Robinson, and on Monday the 15th of April, she said goodbye to everyone and told them that she was going to go to Jersey City to visit a friend, and from there would go to her family home in Franklin in order to prepare for her wedding. Nothing in her manner suggested distress or uncertainty. She appeared in good spirits and spoke calmly of her plans. Before leaving, she made practical arrangements for the journey. 2 trunks were sent ahead by express, one to Jersey City, the other to Franklin. When several days passed without word from her, concern began to grow. Mrs. McKenna, the friend Miss Tobin had intended to visit in Jersey City, reported that she had never arrived, and alarmed by her absence, Miss McKenna went to Dr. Robinson to ask if he had heard from Mary. He told her that he had not. As the days passed with no news of her, uncertainty turned into fear, and inquiries were made among friends and relatives, but no one could say where she had gone and what had become of her. Residents spoke of her in the highest terms, praising her character and kindness of heart. On Sunday the 12th of May 1889, Mary had been missing for 27 days, and concern and anxiety about her whereabouts was still growing. On that morning, a man named Thomas Armour, who was the boat keeper at Clifton Boat Club, was returning to his duties when his attention was drawn to an object floating a short distance from the shore. At first glance, he took it to be nothing more than a bundle of rags, drifting idly upon the water. However, as he looked more carefully, he was startled to discover that it was in fact the body of a woman. At once he took the boat into the water and brought the body to shore. He then informed the authorities. Coroner Hughes soon arrived. and his brief examination revealed that the body was that of a woman who had long dark brown hair and regular composed features. Her height was estimated as about 5 feet 5 inches. She was fully dressed. Beneath her clothing were white undergarments and a blue and white striped petticoats. Over them she wore a dark cloth dress with a matching jacket, black stockings and buttoned gaiters. On the third finger of her left hand was a gold ring set with a cat's eye stone, and on her left wrist were 2 black beaded bracelets. In her pocket, the only object found was a prayer book, and it was noted that there were no marks of violence on her body. Decomposition showed that she had been in the water for some time. Her clothing was coated with a greasy film, believed to be the residue carried up from the upper bay, from the oil tanks at Bayonne in New Jersey. The body was placed in an icebox and removed to the Clifton morgue, where the following day the deceased woman was formally identified as Miss Mary F. Tobin, who had previously worked for Dr. Robinson. On the same day that the body was identified, Dr. John Feeney performed an autopsy under the direction of Coroner Hughes. The results, however, were not made public, as the coroner ordered that they be withheld until the day of the inquest, which was scheduled for Friday the 17th of May. Because there were no visible signs of violence, the coroner and the police initially dismissed the idea of murder and instead put forward the possibility that Mary had died by her own hand. It was suggested that her forthcoming marriage might have been abandoned, leaving her so distressed that she threw herself into the water. Those close to Mary rejected this explanation. They insisted that she was not a woman given to such despair and pointed out that she had been looking forward to returning home and had spoken cheerfully about her future as a wife. Reverend Mortimer of St. Mary's Church shared this view. He said that Mary was a very level-headed young lady and not someone prone to impulsive acts. In the meantime, there was much speculation and investigation by both the police and newspaper reporters. They brought to light details that clarified Miss Tobin's movements from the time she said goodbye to Dr. Robinson and his family on Monday the 15th of April. It was discovered that when Miss Tobin left Dr. Robinson's home, she told her family that she intended to go and see a friend in Jersey City named Mrs. F. McKenna. Before leaving, she offered to take with her an index book containing the addresses of Dr. Robinson's patients and update it for him. She said that she would make additional entries and post it back to him in a few days. The book was given to her in wrapped brown paper, and the doctor took the precaution of writing his name and address on the outside. Then, after asking Dr. Robinson about the train schedules, Miss Tobin said her farewells and left. However, she did not go straight to the train station. Instead, she went to the home of Dr. Bryan, where she spent some time. Dr. Bryan had formerly worked for Dr. Robinson, but the two men had fallen out after a disagreement and had since gone their separate ways. Later that evening, Miss Tobin left Dr. Bryan's house, intending to catch a train from West New Brighton to St. George, and then take a boat to Manhattan and a train on to Jersey City. Strangely, when reporters and police spoke to station staff, no one could recall her purchasing a ticket. Friends told both the police and reporters that Mary always wore a small purse on a ribbon beneath her dress, and they stressed that on that day it would have contained a substantial amount of money, as along with the money she would have received from Dr. Robinson, it would have contained $45 that had been recently sent to her by her brother, as well as a card with her name and address. The purse was missing when the body was found, and because her clothing was tightly fastened and had to be cut away by the coroner, it could not have been removed afterwards. Its absence raised suspicion that robbery may have played a role in her death. Dr. Robinson confirmed to the authorities that his book had been returned by a messenger boy and that the brown paper in which it had been wrapped had not been undone, a fact that he said had caused him unease, as he knew that his book would not have been updated. He added that a few days later, after a letter had arrived from a relative of Miss Tobin's, asking if he knew her whereabouts, he began to worry. Dr. Robinson was asked whether Miss Tobin had intended to be married, a question which he declined to answer. When questioned separately, Dr. Bryan also refused to speak on the subject. However, when journalists spoke to Mrs. McKenna at her home in Jersey City, she told them that Miss Tobin had spoken openly about her intentions to marry. In a statement to reporters, she said that Miss Tobin had told her that she was engaged to be married to Dr. Bryan, and in the days before she disappeared, she had been shopping and making purchases in preparation for her wedding. She added that Dr. Bryan owned a pleasant home in West New Brighton, where he and Miss Tobin intended to live, and confirmed that the last time that she had seen her, Miss Tobin was in excellent spirits. Miss McKenna also said that when Mary had not arrived at her house as planned, she became quite worried, so after several days had passed, she went to the house of Dr. Robinson to see if he knew her whereabouts, and he told her that he did not. Looking somewhat distraught, Mrs. McKenna added that she had not been satisfied with the police investigation and said that when she had spoken to Dr. Bryan, while he expressed surprise at Mary's failure to arrive at her house in Jersey City, he did not appear deeply concerned and suggested that she had probably just gone to her home in Pennsylvania. Miss McKenna then said that she did not believe this, as she felt sure that her friend would not have changed her plans so suddenly. It also came to light that after the news of Mary Tobin's death reached her family, they replied by telegram that they would come at once. Shortly thereafter, her brother asked the coroner to restrict further viewings of the body, while their father, Mr. N.P. Tobin, wrote to Dr. Robinson requesting 2 or 3 affidavits to formally identify Mary for insurance purposes. These communications, though practical in nature, nevertheless prompted speculation that the family may have known more about the circumstances of her death than they had disclosed. Miss Tobin's brothers learned that one of her trunks was being held at the railroad station in Jersey City, and they also confirmed that the family was aware of her engagement to Dr. Bryan and that she had intended to return home to make preparations for the wedding. When the day of the inquest arrived, large crowds gathered at the coroner's office on New York Avenue in Clifton, eager to hear the testimony in the case. The coroner was irritable throughout. No stenographer was present to record the testimony, and when the jury attempted to ask a question, they were immediately silenced. Although this was a case involving a serious mystery, no representative from the district attorney's office was present, as was normally required. No one in the room in any official capacity seemed to understand or properly perform the duties of either the coroner or the jury. The first witness called was Thomas Armour, the man who had discovered the body. He testified that he found the body floating in the water on the morning of Sunday the 12th of May, and that the deceased woman was fully dressed and wearing gloves. Dr. Bryan was then called to the stand. As he gave testimony, he appeared to think carefully about every word before speaking. The first thing he did, however, was to announce that he had been engaged to Miss Tobin, and this immediately altered the tone of the proceedings. Once the crowd had quietened, he went on to say that on the 15th of April, Miss Tobin had been at his house for a while, and that she was preparing to go to the train station as she was travelling back to Pennsylvania to prepare for the wedding. He added that before she left, he was called out urgently to see a patient, so he walked her as far as the station, but then they departed. He added that after attending the call, he returned to his house and discovered that Miss Tobin had left behind a package with Dr. Robinson's address written on it. As he knew nothing of it, he locked it in his office, and later he asked a messenger boy to take it to Dr. Robinson. Despite these revelations, there was no cross-examination of Dr. Bryan by either the coroner or the jury. Officer Fulton was the next to give testimony. He told the inquest that he did what he could with limited resources, but when higher-ranking officers, including Captain Blake, entered the witness box, they only gave evasive or unhelpful answers when questioned. The reports of Dr. John Feeney, who conducted the autopsy, and Dr. Loomis, the pathologist of the University of New York, to whom certain organs had been submitted for examination, brought the first part of what was regarded as a farce to a close. Dr. Feeney stated that the cause of death was drowning, and Dr. Loomis was equally firm, saying that Miss Tobin was not in a delicate physical condition. Both said that they believed that the body had been in the water for no more than 9 days. This view had been challenged by another physician, Dr. Walter Woods, who had pointed out that there was no water present in the lungs, leading him to conclude that she was already dead when her body entered the water. However, he was not called to give evidence at the inquest. As she had gone missing on the 15th of April and had been found dead 27 days later, but according to doctors, could have only been in the water for around 9 days, reporters attempted to discover whether anyone else had seen Miss Tobin during that time. 2 witnesses, Miss Hasbrook, who knew Miss Tobin by sight, and Mr. William Madden, the proprietor of a confectionery store, told them that they believed that they had seen her on the evening of the 29th of April, some 2 weeks after she had gone missing. However, they were not called to give evidence, even though, if their accounts were accurate, they would have supported the view that the body had been in the water for only a short time. As no additional witnesses came forward to confirm having seen Miss Tobin alive after the 15th of April, the alleged sightings were regarded as unverified recollections, ultimately carrying little weight in the official consideration of the case. The papers described the inquest as a comedy, and when it reopened the following day, it proved to be no more satisfactory. Interest in the case had grown, and the coroner's standing had suffered as a result. Eventually, a second autopsy was ordered. Coroner Hughes, Dr. Feeney, Dr. Robinson, and Dr. Walter Woods were all present. However, the results were again not made public, reportedly because of disagreements over how to interpret the findings. Following this, one of the jurors openly remarked that nothing useful had been accomplished. The case therefore remained confused and unresolved, and marked by contradictory evidence. It appeared that it was destined to pass into history as yet another unsolved mystery surrounding a suspicious death. In the absence of certainty, gossip rushed in to fill the void, and the story continued on in speculation, accusation, and theories repeated so often that they began to sound like the truth. In reality, no one believed that Mary Tobin's death had been an accident. The testimony of Dr. Bryan had caused much excitement with both the public and the press, and his disclosure that he had been engaged to Mary placed him under suspicion and immediately fueled widespread gossip in West New Brighton. Stories circulated that at that time he had become involved with a young nurse named Fanny Warburton, and due to this, on the 15th of April he had ended his engagement to Mary Tobin, an act said to have left her deeply distressed. It was also noted that when he went out that day to see a patient in Willowbrook, the journey had taken unusually long and appeared to leave 45 minutes for which his movements could not be clearly accounted. Many surmised that he had killed Miss Tobin and either hidden her body or thrown it into the water. However, these allegations were disputed. Miss Warburton stated that her association with Dr. Bryan was strictly professional, and Dr. Bryan explained that the delay in his travel was due to poor road conditions and 2 intermediate stops made along the way. On Sunday, the 22nd of March 1891, Mary Tobin's father, a successful merchant tailor in Franklin, was murdered in his shop, which was then deliberately burnt to the ground. In the months that followed, fresh claims emerged, and renewed calls were made for the reopening of the Mary Tobin case. The principal allegations came from Mrs. Glassford, who had served as housekeeper to Dr. Bryan, and who had recently left his employment. Mrs. Glassford stated that after news broke of the discovery of Miss Tobin's body, Dr. Bryan tore up a white sheet and asked both her and her assistant, Miss Nichols, to remember that he had parted from Miss Tobin at 8 o'clock in front of West New Brighton Station on the night she disappeared. Miss Glassford insisted, however, that it had been in fact 9 o'clock. She also recalled that a few days earlier, Dr. Bryan had received a telegram from a married lady friend announcing the death of her husband, and added that Miss Tobin had been crying when she left the doctor's house. Further allegations were made by Dr. Robinson, who said that he had intended to present all the facts at the inquest, being firmly convinced that the young woman had been murdered, but insisted that the case had been taken out of his hands. He stated that due to this, he only gave brief evidence at the inquest. Dr. Robinson also stated that the post-mortem examination that had been conducted by Coroner Hughes and Doctors Feeney, Bryan and himself revealed evidence that the woman had been assaulted, yet no physician was called to testify to this crucial finding. He further claimed that 2 reports had been prepared from the organ tests, one for the medical profession and the other for the public. He added that the body could not have been in the water for more than a week, despite Miss Tobin having been missing for nearly a month, and suggested that it must have been concealed somewhere on Staten Island during that time. Although this again fueled suspicion among the residents of West New Brighton, the authorities did not take any further action. On Monday the 28th of September 1891, the shop in which Mary's brother, Mr. David Tobin, was a partner, was deliberately set on fire and destroyed. The crime, like the others, was never solved. Most people came to believe that Mary Tobin's death had been mishandled by the authorities, and that she, like her father, had been murdered, perhaps by the same hand that later set fire to her brother's shop. Yet the investigation was never reopened, and neither the death of Miss Mary Tobin, or the murder of her father, nor the destruction of her brother's business were ever resolved.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much for listening. As usual,
Please leave any comments or feedback you may have, and I hope to see you all again in the next brief case.